You know that feeling when you're trying to prove something? I mean, really prove it, all the way down to the absolute rock-bottom truth. Well, today we're going to dive into a pretty mind-bending philosophical puzzle called the Münchhausen Trilemma. And it basically suggests that this whole quest for absolute, undeniable proof, it might just be an impossible mission from the get-go.
So let me introduce you to this guy. This is the legendary Baron Münchhausen. The stories about him are completely wild. And in one of his most famous tall tales, he gets himself and his horse stuck in a swamp. So how does he get out? Simple. He just reaches down, grabs his own hair, and yanks himself clean out of the muck.
Okay, so obviously that's just physically impossible, right? You can't do that. You need something solid, something external to push off of. But here's the kicker. What if that's the perfect metaphor for how we justify our beliefs? When we try to prove something is true, are we all kind of like the Baron, just trying to pull ourselves out of a swamp of doubt with nothing real to stand on? So yeah, the Baron's crazy escape, it's not just some funny story. It's actually a really powerful way to think about a super deep philosophical problem. The whole problem comes down to this idea of bootstrapping. See, the Baron had no solid ground to work with, and when we go searching for absolute proof, we have the exact same issue. How can you possibly prove your very first, most basic belief without already assuming something else is true to begin with? It's like trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation of nothing but air.
So where do we actually run into this impossible task in, our everyday lives? Well, it often starts with one simple but incredibly frustrating question. Why?
I mean, if you've ever tried to explain something to a really curious kid, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Why is the sky blue? And you explain, light scattering. But why does light scatter? So you talk about wavelengths. But why do wavelengths exist? And sooner or later, you just hit a wall. You have to say, because it just does. And that frustrating dead end, that's the trilemma in a nutshell.
And that's the absolute core of the Münchhausen Trilemma. It's a thought experiment that says anytime you try to prove a truth, you're going to get forced down one of three paths. And here's the problem. If what you're looking for is total, absolute certainty, all three of those paths are dead ends.
All right, so what are these three dead-end streets? Let's break down the three horns of this dilemma. Each one shows a different way our hunt for ultimate proof just falls apart.
First up, you've got the circular argument. This is when the proof for something basically just assumes that same something is already true. Like if someone says, this book has to be true. And when you ask why, they say, well, because it says so right here in the book. You haven't actually gone anywhere. You've just run around in a little circle.
Path number 2 is what philosophers call the infinite regress. And this is that endless why game we were talking about. Every single proof you offer needs its own proof, and that proof needs a proof, and that one needs another, on and on, forever and ever. It's like trying to climb a ladder that just keeps going up into the clouds with no final rung to stand on. You never, ever reach the top.
And finally, path number 3, the dogmatic argument. This is basically where you just stop. You throw your hands up and end the chain of whys. You hit some point and just declare that something is a self-evident truth or a fundamental axiom. You're not actually proving it anymore, you're just asserting it. You're giving up the mission.
Okay, so let's just quickly pull all that together. We're in a real pickle here, right? Path 1 is the circle. It doesn't actually teach us anything new. Path 2 is the infinite ladder. You never find solid ground. And path 3 is the hard stop, where you just give up on proving anything at all. None of these gets us that rock-solid certainty we were looking for.
And by the way, the guy who actually gave this whole thing its name was a German philosopher, Hans Albert. He put it really simply. Any search for certain justification has to fail. You only have three options. You can fall into an infinite regression, you can get stuck in a logical circle, or you can just break off the search. And that break, that's the dogmatic argument. You just stop asking.
So, if ultimate proof is totally impossible, does that mean everything is meaningless? Are we just lost? Well, not quite. The real question is, how do we move forward from here?
And this is a really important point. The trilemma doesn't prove that truth doesn't exist, or that every opinion is just as good as any other. All it really shows is that our grasp on truth is always going to be a little bit uncertain. Just because we can't have absolute 100% certainty doesn't mean we have to throw out the whole idea of objectivity.
So what's the alternative? Well, thinkers like Karl championed an idea called fallibilism, and this is really the key takeaway here. Fallibilism basically embraces the idea that our knowledge is always going to be imperfect. And you know what? That's okay.
The goal isn't to find one final, unshakable truth. The goal is to get into a process of constantly testing our ideas, being willing to correct our mistakes, and slowly but surely getting closer to what's real. So you can really see the two different mindsets here, right? On one side, you have this rigid, desperate quest for certainty, which, as we've seen, drives you straight into one of those three traps. But on the other side, you have fallibilism. It's more flexible, it's more humble. It's all about critical thinking and being ready to admit that we might be wrong. It's about making progress, not about finding perfection.
In the end, the Münchhausen Trilemma doesn't give us any easy answers. It actually does the opposite. It pulls the rug out from under the very idea of absolute proof and shows us that the foundations of what we believe might not be nearly as solid as we'd like to think. So it leaves us with a huge question, one for you to think about. If we can't prove our beliefs beyond any shadow of a doubt, then how do we decide what's worth believing?